Hi everyone and welcome to this video. So this video is going to be based on your investigation and within this video what I'll be doing is walking you through this document which I've created which walks you through everything that is involved in your investigation write-up. So what I have done is provided you with sort of a template that you can use to walk yourself through each section of your investigation, and then it will make more sense to you what you need to include within your investigation write-up. So as you can see here, what I've done is given you a checklist. In bold, right here, I've got your headings or the sections that you need to include in your investigation. So the first one being your proposal. So just here, and then underneath I have a couple of dot points which shows you what you need to include within your proposal. Then I have your introduction, and again as a heading, and again dot points underneath which show you what you need to include within your introduction. So what I'm going to do here is walk you through each section bit by bit. The way that I'd like you to use this video is that when you are up to a particular section within your investigation write-up, you can just watch that section of the video, see what you need to include, make sure you use it as a checklist, making sure that you have included each of the dot points, and then once you have, then you can move on to the next section and listen to me explain that section. So if I just move down really quickly, we can see that you've got your proposal, which you do first, then you will do your introduction. Then once you have completed your introduction, you'll move over to your results. I have a short example there that I'll go through in a minute. Then you have your discussion, your ethical considerations, and your conclusion. So let's go back up to the top, and I'll start from the beginning. So when writing your investigation, you need to start with a proposal. This is done, the proposal is done as if you write it as if you haven't done the investigation before, you haven't completed the investigation before. So you need to write it as if you haven't been provided with the data yet. So the first thing that you need to include in your proposal is a description of the focus of the investigation as a whole. So what I mean there is that you don't know all the information that you are going to be gathering specifically within the investigation. So it needs to be a general overview of the focus of the investigation. So don't be too specific about the data that you'll be collecting, because you don't know the technicalities of the specific data that you'll be gaining within the investigation. So make sure that it is a general focus, not too specific. Then within that, you explain why the study's been conducted. Then you will, in doing that, then you will identify the data to be selected, so that you can analyse the investigation design to be used. So depending on the data that you'll be collecting, that will actually lead you into a specific investigation design. So remembering that we have 3 specific investigation designs: experimental, quantitative, observational, and qualitative. So make sure that you look at the specifics within each of those investigation designs so that you know which one it falls into. So when you do select that investigation design, I don't want you to just say, oh, the investigation that we will be using with the investigation design that we will be using within this investigation is experimental, and leave it at that. I'd like you to explain why. So what are the factors within that experimental design, and how does it fit into that design? Then after that, you will go to the 4th dot point. So elaborate on the data being used. So what data sets are you using? Are you using male and female? Are you using, what are you using to answer your question or hypothesis, and explain how that fits into that data design. So remembering that, again, we have 3 different data designs. We have the subjective quantitative, objective quantitative, and qualitative. So why have you chosen that one, and how does it fit into that, the data? So you need to explain again. You can't just state what data design you're using. Okay, and remembering to include your question and hypothesis there as well in your proposal. So once you've done your proposal, you are ready to move on to your introduction. So here I've got your introduction and the dot points underneath there that I would like you to include. So the first thing that you'll do within your introduction is briefly explain the topic of cognition. So explain its importance and why we may learn and study this topic. So you will need to do some more research on this using the internet or any books that you might know that include information on the topic of cognition. So cognition is like working with your memory. So you'll provide just a short little statement there explaining the topic of cognition, and remember that won't be your own work, so remember to reference the information that you use. Then you will also explain the factors that may affect cognition in your investigation. So depending on the information that you provide on cognition, there might be specific factors that might affect your question. So there might be some information there that you can sort of connect to your question or hypothesis that you have stated. Then you will state your research hypothesis again, because the introduction is separate to your proposal. So you are going to repeat some information because your proposal was done before the investigation and your introduction is done afterwards. So you restate your hypothesis, and then you clearly outline the data that you will use to answer your hypothesis again. And the calculations that you will carry out. So here you're extending that data, the information on your data. You'll be explaining things like, will you be using your mean, your median, how will you be calculating that data, how will you be analysing it. Also, you might want to state your graph that you might be using, just things like that. You're outlining the data and explaining it a bit further. And then the last little bit is just explaining what your data is helping you to test. So how is that data helping you to answer your question and helping you test that specific hypothesis that you've chosen? And once you have done your introduction, you're ready to move on to your results section. So the results section is, for example, I've got a couple of visuals here that you can look at. First of all, the dot point that I have under the results is display your data using the graph, and or tables that you've used, make sure that you label them correctly. So under the results section, here you have you'll be provided with the information that we've gathered within our investigation when we carried it out. So you'll be provided with all of that information, and then what you will do is create a graph or a table that condenses that information and shows how you have, I guess, how you're going to answer your hypothesis or your question and support that. So, for example, I've grabbed a couple of examples that the SACE board has for us to show how you might illustrate your data in a graph. So what we've got here is this investigation was carried out on aggression. So what the group here is looking at, if I just pop this up a little bit more, is their question that they are trying to answer is there a relationship between heart rate and emotion? Verbal aggression and anger. So they're looking at verbal aggression and anger specifically. So that's why they have two graphs here. So that's the question that they are trying to answer just here. So what they've done is gathered the data that they need for that. So they are looking at the heart rate. So they've got their heart rate data on the x-axis, and then they've got the data that they found for verbal aggression on the y-axis. So they've labelled that correctly. Then within that data, they have placed on their scatter plot the different points that the data links up there. On the other hand, they've got their heart rate down the bottom here on this graph on the x-axis, and the data for the results for the anger on their y-axis. and they've created a scatter plot there as well. So because they are looking at answering, is there a relationship between heart rate and emotion, they've used a scatter plot because they can show a relationship, either a positive or negative relationship, and in doing so they have put their line of best fit there as well. So in looking at this graph that they have provided, they can form a conclusion based on their graph. So what they have said is the results indicate that heart rate is related to two types of emotion, verbal aggression and anger. The relationship is positive, which you can see by the graph. As heart rate goes up, so does self-reported emotion, but a bicausal relationship is implied between the variables. So they've provided a conclusion based on the graphs that they've also shown us. Now, I'd like you to just take note that the conclusion, this little write-up here, is not displayed in your results section. The only thing that I want you to display in your results section is the graph or your tables. So no elaboration on that just yet. So just your results. What have you created? Where's your graph? Where's your table? Okay. Once you've done that, we're ready to move on to our discussion. So this is your main bit of your investigation, and it discusses the results that you found. You're also trying to answer your hypothesis here. So under discussion, we have discuss your results here. State whether the question or hypothesis has been supported. Give your reasons. So has it been supported? Why not? You'll use information from your data sets up here. So you use information that you have from your results section in your discussion. Using words, discuss your results that you can see. Are the differences that you see significant? So here it can be something along the lines of what you see in your graph, just as this example has just here. So what do you see in your graph? Is it supported or is it not supported? And here are the differences you see significant. So if you're providing us with a graph or a table, can we see a significant difference, or is it very, very small? And give reasons for that. Then, what do your results show? So remember, you need to explain what your results show. Discuss your research design type. So the design type you have discussed previously in your introduction, but just restate it here. So what design type are you using in your investigation, and how is it showing this? How is your data showing this design type? Then you discuss your sample size. So is it a small or large sample size? Sample size is really important within an investigation and drawing conclusions, because if your sample size is too small, then it's not really giving you enough information for, I guess, if you're trying to then make links with the whole population. So think about the sample size that we've used. What have we used? How many people were in your sample size? How many participants did we use? And then can you draw conclusions from your sample size? Why or why not? Thinking about how big our sample size was. Okay, so then we've got a couple of sections underneath the discussion that you need to include. So that is your validity and reliability, and your strengths and weaknesses. So looking at validity and reliability, what validity means is, does the measure used for the dependent variable measure what it is supposed to measure? So if you're using some test results as your dependent variable, is that test valid? Is it measuring what it's supposed to be measuring? So you can take a look back at that test, and you can have a bit of a discussion about why you think it is valid or why you don't think it is valid. Then reliability. So does the test measure what it is supposed to measure each time it is used? So is this a reliable measure? If we were to conduct this investigation again, Do you think that we would gather similar results, or would the results be totally different? If you think that if we were to do this investigation again and the results would be very different, then maybe it might not be a reliable investigation design. Okay, and then we're going to move to strengths and weaknesses. This is still under your discussion. So the first stop point we have is, was the research conducted in an ethical manner? So you're thinking about ethics, linking back to the ethics that we have within psychology. This may prove to be a strength, or this may prove to be a weakness, depending on the ethics that have been followed or haven't been followed. This is up to you. Again, you can look at the sample size. This could be a strength or a weakness. Any extraneous variables. So are there any other variables that could have impacted our results or impacted our research? What are they? Is that then a weakness? If there are many extraneous variables, then this could be a weakness in the investigation. Can you see any flaws in the way that we've conducted our investigation? Discuss this here. And also you need to suggest improvements at the end of your discussion. What could be improved within this investigation to make it more, I guess, valid and reliable? Okay, so that is your discussion, remembering that you need to go through and check off all of this list to make sure that you have everything included there. Okay, now once you've done that, we're ready to move up onto ethical considerations. So you're discussing the relevant ethical principles used or not used within an investigation. You may have already touched base with that in your strengths and weaknesses, but making sure that you do discuss it in detail here. What ethics have been used, what ethics haven't been used within an investigation, how could they be better used, things like that. And once you've done that, you're ready to complete your conclusion. So within your conclusion, you're going to restate your hypothesis and then describe whether it was supported or not. So you are concluding your study, but making sure that you don't state anything new. So within your conclusion, you are not giving us any new information. We shouldn't find out anything that we haven't heard before within the rest of your investigation. You're just restating what you have found and just concluding your whole investigation. And then right at the end, if you have used any references, remembering to include your references at the end of your investigation. And you should have, if we make our way back up to the top, you should have referenced the topic of cognition at some point. And there's other information that you might have gathered within your investigation that you think might support your discussion as well. Okay, so working through this video, I hope that it does help you to write up your investigation. Remembering to, you can stop and start as many times as you like within this video, focusing on each section as you go along. Make sure you do work through your investigation in the right order. If I come back up to the top here, now the way that I've set it out is the way that you should be setting out your investigation as well. Having the titles proposal, introduction, results, discussion, and ethical considerations and conclusion will help you set out your investigation as well. So making sure that you do include the titles there will help you to write your investigation. And another pointer being that you are only using your displaying your data in the results section and not actually explaining your data until you go to your discussion section. Okay, so good luck with your investigation write-up, and just refer to this video as you need.